Watching the Tudors. I'm Heather.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this is the show where we watch the Tudors and talk about the real history behind the drama. And it's getting dramatic.
It is. It's getting exciting.
This is episode 10, Woolsey Dies. It's called The Death of Wolsey. And that kind of is the spoiler alert as to what happens.
Yes. Spoiler alert, the title gives it away.
And so just a little bit of background on this podcast. I, Heather, have the Renaissance English History podcast, which I started in 2009. And I thought it would be fun to go back and watch the Tudors and talk about what was real, what was dramatic, what actually wasn't at all. And I thought it'd be fun to do it with my husband.
Yeah, and I thought it'd be fun to learn about history by watching a television show, kind of easily digestible and entertaining. And I'm finding it very much that. I'm enjoying learning about things and becoming interested.
Every week you're like, this is getting more interesting.
Yeah. And then I think about it the next time I watch the show. So,
yeah.
And I heard something referenced the other day that had to do with, like, this time, and I actually understood what they were talking about. So go you.
Me.
Yeah.
And you can learn more about us at watchingthetudors.com. That's also the page on my other podcast site, so you can get all the links there. And if you like this show, please leave us a rating in iTunes. It really helps people find the show and push us ahead in the rankings. This episode, Woolsey Dies. I think it was the season finale, and everything just goes to crap.
Because it kind of seemed like I was thinking it might be a season finale. It seemed like it was all building and all changing and all setting up.
Yeah. And so basically Wolsey is arrested for treason. Cromwell's rising. They have a big party when he dies. And Thomas More's starting to arrest heretics and burn people. And it's all... And it's like Anne and Henry have sex.
And there's a crescendo of... reformism in the air.
And there's some really good music. I have to say, I really like the soundtrack of this show. And so also, I just said all that before saying the spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. This is our regular warning that we talk about the stuff that happens in the show. So if you don't want to know, don't listen. We're assuming that you've watched or are watching along with us. And also
we just talk about broader... sort of history as well. Like, for example, the last question I'm going to ask Heather today is going to be about what happens to people in the future. So, if you want to be surprised, maybe skip the last question. I'll give you a warning.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
All right. So, what on earth was going on at the beginning of this?
All right. So Henry was masturbating into a bucket that his groom was holding.
I never even saw a bucket. It just looked like him
in a towel
going to town on his buddy
while he was thinking about Anne embroidering. So can I just tell you, this is actually the scene that had me want to do this podcast, because a friend of mine, Roy Field Brown, who's another podcaster, he asked me, would something like that have actually ever happened? And it was like the genesis of this podcast was that scene. And the answer is no. And I'll tell you why. It's not the privacy issue of doing it. The groom of the stool did all kinds of stuff. So it's not like the groom of the stool knew everything about you.
So that's why
it was called the groom of the stool.
He's the groom of the stool?
Probably that's who that would have been, yes.
All right.
And he was the guy who was in charge of all of Henry's bodily functions.
All things stool.
And we talked about that before, how that was actually a really coveted position because you were so close to the king.
I remember. Yeah, I was talking about washing feet and stuff.
Exactly. Why this wouldn't have happened like this is because masturbation was a sin for men, and especially for a king, because you were wasting the seed. And so if you were, I'm sure it happened, obviously.
But it wouldn't have gone down like that.
Yeah, you wouldn't have done it in full public because you were committing, what was considered a sin, and especially for the king, who's the head of the church, to be doing that. If Henry masturbated, he did it in private. I'm sure the groom of the stool knew because he was at the bottom of the bed. He could tell, but it wasn't in full daylight, in full view of everybody like that. So, short answer, no.
All right.
Next up.
All right.
What?
I thought that was going a different way when you said that he couldn't masturbate. I thought maybe that was another job of
somebody else. Somebody else could
of the groom.
All right,
the groom
stop.
of the stool.
Just stop.
And then the king was talking to his, what do you call that? I called it his panel. Like what are those?
His privy council.
So his privy council. So he's speaking to all his guys, appointed people. What was he alluding? Do you know what he was alluding to when he said, things have been going on without my knowledge here and without my permission, but things are going to change. Like, do you know what he was talking to?
He was just talking about how Wolsey did all this kind of stuff, and he was finding out about all this stuff after the fact, and he wanted.
Okay. It was kind of like what they were talking about later. They're like, oh, well, he did this with France and this and that. Yeah. So, okay.
Henry didn't actually run the government at all for like the first 20 years of his reign.
Just kind of let that handle itself.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what he was referring to with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now, like, getting Wolsey out of the scene wasn't enough for Norfolk. Like, he wants to kill him now.
Yeah. And I don't know in real life the like level of drama that they built around this, but he certainly would have had a reason for wanting Wolsey to actually
get him
be
officially out
gone.
Of the scene.
Yes.
All right. And then did Wolsey? Do we know that he actually contacted Anne, or he tried to contact Anne?
Yes, he tried to contact Anne, and
it went as it went. She said no thanks.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say this is where she took her revenge for Wolsey having kept her from marrying early Percy, the other guy that she wanted to marry before she met Henry, and Wolsey had said no. Remember we talked about that.
Yeah.
So some people say this is where like she really enacted her revenge by turning him away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like he caused this whole thing to begin with.
Yeah, anyways, it's like if you would have just let me marry him, well, it would have been done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Huh.
She would have been having sons by that point.
Yep, and not waiting and So now more like his job is what Wolsey used to do. I mean, not the religious. He isn't a cardinal, but Wolsey used to be the chancellor, or whatever.
Yeah,
his
and
title.
He was also the Privy Seal. I mean, there's like
he was many things.
Yeah, but
as
Moore's
far as
doing
that,
one of that.
That's
that
what
part
that
of it.
job title is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he is taking it seriously.
Yeah, and what was that? Was that like the religious thing? Like what is it? I mean, why is he going after
the Lord Chancellor? Really it's the British officer of state who is the custodian of the Great Seal and the cabinet minister, the head of the judiciary, and speaker of the House of Lords. So
it's not necessarily leader of like all things religious or whatever.
Yeah, it's just kind of the prime, like maybe the prime minister kind of equivalent, like the head person.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably in charge of the money as well. And I think just
generally sort of.
And it also, formerly in the Middle Ages, it was always a churchman. Mm-hmm. And it performed multiple functions: keeper of the Great Seal, chief of the royal chaplain, advisor in both spiritual and temporal matters.
All right.
Yeah.
And I'm on your computer. I'm seeing a picture of Thomas More.
Yep.
Looks kind of like the Thomas More they cast.
Yeah.
So if you ever wondered. All right. And so More, like getting in there, like as you said, he's really getting on the heretics like right away.
Yeah, he is.
It's kind of like I am in charge.
Like, I got my power now.
People are burning.
Yep.
Yeah. And like he said in this episode, he said, I'm not so vain as to show off, but I'm going to use it to start burning people.
Yep. That I don't know if you're going to ask me, but Bishop Fish, the one that was the main drama one that they showed there, or John Fish, the person, he wasn't actually burned. He died of the plague.
Details.
Yep.
When it's more just a statement, I guess. Cromwell must not have liked hearing More's new stance in his office about how he's going after these new...
That's why he had to get on Henry's good side right away and be like, here, let me tell you my plan.
Because he wanted to protect himself against that movement.
Yep.
Him and all his buddies, too. And then, juxtaposed to the king, like they went from that scene to the king reading his heretical, is that a word? Mm-hmm. Heretical books.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting how Moore's going one way and the king is going another.
And Moore just doesn't accept it because it's so. And this is where like that great change, like you said, we haven't seen the show only picks up with Anne really, but we did see in the beginning in one of the first episodes him writing the defense that he wrote against Luther. And he was such a devout, and even we talked about this last time, even until the end of his life, he would remain a Catholic in everything but name. You would still be, he still persecuted heretics and stuff like that. And so Moore wasn't particularly wrong in thinking that. He just underestimated how badly Henry wanted to be in charge of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
all right. And then it seemed, you just mentioned this as well, but it seemed like Henry really switched gears. Like, once the ruling happened, it's like Wolsey's out, like things are changing.
Yeah, well, I think he reached. Yeah, I think he probably, we're years into it at this point.
And then him and Anne are just out there, and all right.
Yeah, this was about the time that Catherine was sent away from court too.
I see.
Yeah.
And then who was that? What's his
Chapuis.
Chapuis. He was the Spanish ambassador guy,
and he's the guy. He's why I want to go up to Simancas, because all of his letters are in the state archives.
So like back from England. And
yeah,
stuff.
Exactly.
Huh.
I want to go see them. Yeah, he was the Spanish ambassador. He was actually the emperor's ambassador, but the emperor was based in Spain at that point. So.
And can you explain to me like what he was saying? The king. He was saying about I would have supported Luther, but for ... Like I don't. Yeah, can you just?
Well, he's just saying if Luther, and there were a lot of Catholics who felt this way at that point. In France, especially, there were several prominent women who. But if Luther would have just said, "Look, the church is corrupt. We got to do something about that, about these indulgences and blah 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 blah," like they would have been able to support that. But because he went a step further and said the church is corrupt, also it's not true. Also, the Pope is a devil. Also, all the kind of opening it up for all of that kind of stuff, that's where you lose them.
I see.
And so what he's saying is, I truly believe that the church is ridiculously corrupt and blah, 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 blah. And, we need to have reforms about that. And I would have supported Luther if he would have just stopped with that.
So I guess, like, this is where, my lack of history. I mean, I knew Luther, kind of spat in the face of the Catholic Church. But, like, what... I mean, I guess, like, did he say, like, a lot of wild stuff like that?
Well, yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, he said that didn't have, let me just look this up. Let's look, the full text of the 95 Theses. He basically said that the Pope that didn't have the right to punish people, the Pope couldn't forgive sins, the Pope is not necessary really much, and that you don't have to pay indulgences, and that, basically that the Pope was kind of useless. Yeah.
Okay, so it was kind of all that. Like, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that,
so
here's something it says,
like there's
number 36 in his 95 Theses, every Christian who feels sincere repentance and woe on account of his sins has perfect remission of pain and guilt, even without letters of indulgence. So even without the Pope, if you feel... If you repent on your own, you don't need somebody else to tell you that you're forgiven, which is a huge... That's what Protestant is based on there, is that it's up to the individual to be able to have that relationship with God themselves. And it says, every true Christian, be he still alive or already dead, partaketh in all benefits of Christ and of the church given to him by God, even without the letters of indulgence from the Pope. So, it's not something that the Pope is necessary.
And letters of indulgences were basically, you just like bought them from the church.
Yes, and that was what really set Luther off, was at this time the Pope did another round of indulgences to pay for wars, and it was...
So it's like, all you people... All your old letters aren't good anymore. They've expired, and you go to hell if you don't buy new ones.
And people would...
If you don't renew your indulgences.
Yeah, and people would pay for masses to be sung for their souls when they died. And actually, it's a growth in it's part of the reasons why choirs grew so much around this time, as people were paying for choirs to sing masses for their souls when they died and stuff like that. So, people were giving money left, right, and sideways to upside down, wherever way they could, to the Pope. And he was saying, this is...
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
And then Charles Brandon, was he, like... He seems rather absent from his responsibilities as whatever. Well, I mean, what would you call him? Like, I wrote down leader. Like, I mean, what would you?
He's just one of the ministers. He's part of the Privy Council, and the Privy Council were the people who were the closest to
I know,
the
but
king.
would they have titles? Were they
Yeah,
like
he was-
Privians? Or
No, members of the Privy Council.
okay, so he'd be a member of the Privy Council.
Yeah. He started out as just one of Henry's friends. He
Yeah.
wasn't raised as
No,
nobility.
and all of a sudden he was married to a princess,
Yep.
if you will. And,
Yep. So I think he was just...
marrying all sorts of people. He's
Yep.
like, oh, you're married to a king of another place? Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I'm Charles Brandon.
Exactly.
It's time to go hunting and find another girlfriend.
Yep. Pretty much.
All right. Catherine Willoughby?
Yeah.
Speaking of Brandon, that's who he ran
Married.
into?
Yeah, and she was his ward. And so what that means is if you were a noble girl or boy and your parents died, you were considered a ward. And so what that meant is the king took your money, your land, but the idea was he would then entrust it to someone who would care for you.
Okay.
And you would probably live at their place, and they would bring you up. But
Yeah.
then they got to also then decide who you would marry.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very. It's actually the whole birth of the Tudors in part in the 100 years before, or 70 years before this, or whatever, was Margaret Beaufort, who was Henry VII, Henry Tudor's mother. Her wardship, she was a ward, and because her father died, her wardship was given to the Tudors, which were the Henry VI half brothers, and so it was like a reward to them. He gave her the wardship of Margaret Beaufort because she was an heiress, and then they could decide who she would marry. And they wound up marrying she married one of the brothers, and then out of that was born Henry VII. So the idea was you would have these wards who had a lot of money, and you would give that as a gift to a noble person. You'd say, "Here, bring them up and be good to them." And while they're minors, you get to keep their money, and then marry them off to a good family. But they would generally just marry them themselves if they
just
could
do what
to
they
keep
could.
the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's what Catherine Willoughby was. And she was born in 1519, I think. So at this point, she would have been like 14 when she married
whatever.
Charles Brandon. Yeah.
Huh. And then, and he said, I'm going to marry her, and he did.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
nice.
Well, not very nice for her. She had to be married to this old man, but okay. It's normal, I guess.
And then the Mr. Fish guy. Mm-hmm. Do we know, do we know if this how it was played out at all? I mean, it seemed like he took a mighty large gamble
Yeah.
walking into Moore's office.
Well, he did come back, and he was arrested, and he died of plague in the Tower in 1531.
Okay, so he wasn't burned alive.
No.
But he was captured
arrested.
and put away.
Yep.
So he might not have come into his office and said that might be a dramatization, but
Yeah.
he came back
And-
to England probably thinking that, Wolsey's gone, so things will be better.
And this was during the time that they were going after. There was the Bible in English, Tyndale's Bible in English, and Hugh Latimer, and there were a bunch of
those
people.
existed at that point?
Yeah, and they
So
were
it
persecuting.
might have seemed what?
No, just they were. Yeah, after Wolsey's fall, it might have seemed. But I think that you're right. It would have been a pretty big gamble.
Yeah.
But there were places like hotbeds of Protestantism in Cambridge and Oxford.
Where you might
and,
have felt safe, kind of amongst your people,
yeah,
but not with Thomas More around.
not with Thomas More on the job.
No, he's
And I
taking
would
names.
think that people would know that about More. I would
Yeah,
think
he doesn't seem to hide his.
No.
But maybe they just thought he was weak. I mean, maybe because, Wolsey kind of had an iron hand.
Well, but also
Whatever.
More was famous for being like a humanist, and he was friends with Erasmus and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm
maybe
probably,
they kind of.
I'm guessing they probably thought,
oh, he's a humanist.
Yeah.
And it's like, unless you're against my religious beliefs, then I'll burn you alive
yeah,
and laugh.
yeah, and
Gosh.
he wrote Utopia and all this
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah.
He was,
Oh, for sure.
So I think people might have thought at that point that.
Yeah, it does kind of seem contradictory that being a humanist and burning people at the stake.
Yeah, it does.
It's like being a feminist and you're the one who carries out atrocities on women. And
Exactly.
It's like, I'm a feminist for the ladies who deserve it. Is
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
meant. But
yeah,
the other ones, yeah. All right, Anne seems quite brash, talking to the Spanish women, saying, "I wish all Spanish people were
at the bottom of the sea.
bottom of the ocean."
Yep.
Was she this abrasive.
Yes,
Like she was just out there just talking like smack to whoever would listen kind of thing. Jeez Louise. I mean, she was like, I'm losing the best years of my life here. You people get out of my way.
Well, for sure, yeah.
And then Cromwell walks into the king. Well, I mean, it wasn't walked in. He was in there for another reason. But he brings up a new strategy. Just that seemed quite brave with what More's doing, burning people. For Cromwell to sort of suggest such a thing to the king seemed quite brave.
Yeah, and this is actually what really happened here in the autumn of 1529 was Cranmer, who became the Archbishop of Canterbury, but he was a Protestant leading theologian. I think probably dramatically they just decided to
not complicate things.
Yeah, not bring in a character right at the end. But Cromwell knew Cranmer, and I think it was, they hooked each other up and they went in the same circles. But it was Cranmer who said, the marriage should be tried by the people throughout Europe.
Yeah.
And, Henry thought that was good and told him to go around to give up his other work and spend all of his time on.
So that was
Cranmer.
What's his name?
Thomas Cranmer.
Cranmer. All right. And he's a Thomas,
yes.
Not to be confused with Thomas More or Thomas Cromwell.
I did an episode very early on in my podcast called A Tale of Four Thomases or something like that. It's just all these Thomases.
There's only 4? It seems like there's 20.
They're the major ones.
I know.
But, so I think they probably, in season 2, we're going to see.
No, I know. Well, yeah. And then they took, they've taken some liberties, so it's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So... Oh, and I wrote down it was like a Jedi mind trick with Cromwell in his office. He was like, yes, there are people around Europe that should be contacted.
Yeah.
And then the king thinks, and he's like, yes, I'm commanding you to go around and contact these European theologians. Good stuff.
Yeah, and then it was, so Cranmer first brought it up to him in the autumn of 1529, and then it was February, March, and April that all of the advisors started going around and consulting.
Getting people's words or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, just more, and then next they're burning him. More is wild. Doesn't it say in the Bible about, man isn't to judge, people? Okay, that's what I thought of as you standing there watching the guy burn.
Right. But he was a heretic.
I just, it's hard for me to understand. I mean, it's just hard. Kind of like other things that they used to do, like bear baiting and stuff. Hard for me to grasp, how that's a thing. And,
it's
and
funny.
that was just normal stuff back then. That's what you do.
There's a saying, I think there's a book actually that says, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. And I think it's easy to watch these kinds of shows and watch the drama and think, oh, they're just like us, but with nicer outfits. Mm-hmm. And, while yes, everybody's human and everybody has the same kinds of deep core human emotions, love of family and all that kind of stuff, they weren't the same as us. Some of these belief systems are put in before the Enlightenment. We have the Enlightenment now. We have all this. There's been... Yeah,
we know that it's like what I'm getting from this guy's being burned and stuff, and I wrote something about it, is just their dedication to their beliefs. It's so real. And I don't, I can't see inside people's hearts, but in these days, people in Western culture at least, it doesn't seem like anyone's that serious. You know what I mean? I mean, I feel like any really dedicated person, if you put them on a stake and says, we're going to burn you alive unless you say blank. Yeah. I mean, I don't feel like that many people, are willing to just be okay, burn me alive. I'm good with that. And it's just, it's like
it's
it's like there wasn't even an option. It's like it couldn't be true otherwise that you were going to meet God after, and I don't mean to make this a conversation about God existing or what God does or anything like that. It's just it's like we have just more ideological freedom or something. Yeah.
Wild. No, and I think it's because, like I said, we have the Enlightenment, we have the scientific revolution. These are still people are arguing and being put to death by saying that the sun goes around the earth rather than the earth, or that the earth goes around the sun. I mean,
and put to death. It's just so wild because that's the part I don't understand, and I guess that's the part I kind of can't understand because, like you're saying, it's a different place. It's like, I don't know, if a guy on the street, comes up to me and it's like, hey, the world is flat. Like, I disagree. I'm of those that believe the world is round. Call me crazy.
Right?
Whatever. Mm-hmm. But like, I don't think the guy deserves to be put to death for it. It's like, okay, that dude believes the world's flat. Like, I might even run into someone who's like, the world is an illusion. Like, it's not even here, and this is, it's like the Matrix or whatever. Yeah. And like, I disagree again, but like,
he doesn't need to die.
No,
for that.
He can live a good life. Like he could babysit my kid. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe he's a really nice guy.
And that's one of the reasons why the Enlightenment, the U.S. and the Constitution and freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff was just so crazy,
like dramatically. Yeah. Like we take it for granted now. It's like, oh, you're stepping on my free speech because I can't, do blank, and it's like, dude. You have no idea
what free speech is. Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's like I tell Hannah, sometimes I'm like, you think Dad's mean. Like, you have no idea what mean is.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
No, so I think that for this kind of stuff,
thank God. I'm so glad we live like now. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I guess for them, they might say...
Well, I'm sure they didn't want to live before then.
Well, no, even they might look at us now, and they might feel very sorry for us at our souls not having the same kind of assurance that they do.
But I have assurance. Well, I just don't need to be burned at the stake for it. I mean, I see what you're saying. It's different times for different people, but I'm just glad that no one's going to put me to death.
Yes.
Really for any... I mean, unless... I do some crazy stuff in a country with a death penalty, but
yeah.
All right.
Rock on.
Wow, that
went deep.
Went away from Renaissance England. All right.
Jedi mind trick.
Okay, the party with Anne that someone commented was
She's
like a wedding.
Yep.
How often? I mean, not that you had an invite list, but do you know about how often they would have parties like this? They were
fairly common because it was a way for the king to reward his nobles for being loyal to him, and
so like once a month. Like I think probably once every few months,
once a week or once every couple weeks.
Okay, so kind of often.
Yeah,
I mean, this wasn't nightly dinner or something.
But it was pretty common, and there wasn't any other entertainment. It's not like you were watching sports together and still watching the game.
And it's not like you were hurting for money or food if you're
it was important for lots of different reasons, networking and it was
and just have a good time.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone wants to dance.
Sure. You don't like the way they dance though.
No, but if it's dancing or no dancing, I'm going to dance.
Nice.
Yeah. So however weird, I got to do it.
Rock on.
And then he really made Dad Boleyn.
Yeah, he made them all royalty
like a duke
because he had Earl Rochford and stuff. He had to Wiltshire. He had to do all that to set up for marrying Anne because
you can't. You have to marry a royalty person.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You're royalty. That's
Congratulations,
funny.
You are now noble.
Yeah, and then him and Anne, at this point, were just way out there, just kissing in public, going to parties. I mean, they weren't even pretending to.
Yep.
And that's how that was.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah, it was like there were two queens.
And it's just all this stuff. I can't believe all this really happened. I mean, it just blows me away that this is not Desperate Housewives, just some completely made up. I mean, this is reality. It's wild.
No, I know, right? That's why, who needs to watch Desperate Housewives when you've got, real history?
Yeah.
You don't even have to watch the actual Tudors, the TV show. You can actually just read the books and watch the documentaries, because they're
There's why to watch Desperate Housewives. Not everyone in the world likes reading as much as you do.
Okay, yeah.
See, I think you forget that all the world loves reading as much as you do.
Yes.
I know. We're missing out, us non-readers. I know how much, just to speak for all the non-readers in the world, I think we have to admit to ourselves that we're missing out on a lot of great stuff, but we're also not spending our time reading, so we're doing other good stuff,
Like playing your video game.
Like playing video games, watching Desperate Housewives.
Oh, God. The next question.
All right. Maybe some people are going to the gym. Maybe some people are doing good with their time.
Next question.
All right. So the Queen seems like she's finally like letting go, like, or at least finally seeing that the king isn't going to let his thing go.
Yeah, I think she's starting to see that.
And then the king really gave Wolsey's palace to Anne.
Yes. He gave all kinds of stuff to Anne.
That's crazy. Hey, do you want a giant palace? Like, oh, that's cool.
Well, as part of ennobling her, right? He needed to give her lots of land and stuff to go along with that.
Sure.
There's no point being a noble lady if you're not going to have
without
anything.
a thing.
Yeah.
And then Moore kind of seemed like a fool talking about the king.
I know, right?
He's like, oh, I know the king. He would never, do this and
you have to remember,
that.
Moore knew Henry since he was a child. So Moore literally knew Henry since he was like 8 years old or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He'd known Henry for like 30 years at this point.
Yeah. And then there's the scene with Thomas Tallis and the Wyatt guy.
Uh-huh.
What's his name? Charles Wyatt?
Thomas Wyatt.
He's another Thomas?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any idea what that conversation was about? And he's like, oh, and I slept with Anne. Like, I mean,
he said I didn't.
Oh, he didn't?
Yeah, because he said, for what it's worth, I didn't.
I thought he said he did. Okay. Yeah. Do you have, was that...
I don't. I think that's just dramatic license.
Or maybe it's for future things setting up.
Yeah, because, he's going to be accused along with her adulterer. He's going to be accused in the adultery trial of her.
Okay.
So it's probably just reminding us all that
he didn't.
That there was this rumor that he did.
And then, Wolsey just has some gall writing to both Anne and the Queen.
Yeah, Wolsey's a little desperate.
He is, that's just some,
And I think...
But pardon me, we were just completely lost.
But remember, that's like what Wolsey does, right? Is have a deal with the French, and then that goes sour. So
and then he goes over to the Spanish, and he's like, "Oh, it's all good."
The Emperor, and okay, let's do this. Huh. So,
and was the government really broke? Like how Henry was saying, we have no money. And
Henry VII left Henry VIII a huge treasure, but Henry VIII spent a crap ton of it building boats and making war on France in the early part of his reign, and he was starting to run. And the other thing is he needed Parliament to raise any taxes, and he hadn't called a Parliament in a long time, and so he was running out of money.
I see. Okay.
He had tried to do a couple of taxes in the 1520s to raise money for wars. One of them, there was actually a protest that succeeded. He had to repeal one of the ones that he wanted to do.
Oh, because of the protest, huh?
Yeah.
And then, and now he's already questioning his new Privy Council.
Yep.
Just seems like a bad scene for those guys. It's like, hey, we're finally in power. We got Wolsey out of here, and now the king's saying we're not as good as Wolsey. And
yep.
Yikes.
I'm sure that I don't know that exact scene took place, but I'm sure there were similar scenes because Wolsey did a ton of stuff. Yeah.
And it'd be really hard to deal with the king knowing how much he changes his mind. Because it's like, if you smell that, like, oh, he's not going to like us, it's like, that next week you could be dead.
Exactly.
Because it's like, oh, this person, now not this person. And
yep.
Yikes. Yeah, I wrote Scary Times for Norfolk.
Yep.
And then Wolsey seemed really brave, like, throwing that out there, like, that the Pope should boss around the king. I mean, it just doesn't, I mean, I know you weren't around, but like, is there, do you know? So first of all, like he really did something like this.
Wolsey was trying to do stuff like this. Yeah. He was trying to talk to Catherine, and he was trying to work out a deal. It was like his final kind of thing. Yeah. Like
to me, it just seems like he wouldn't be that stupid, like knowing the king. I mean, I can't imagine him thinking it would be a good idea, but I don't know. I mean, it seems like something they would do to frame him.
Yeah, I think it was a desperate, and maybe he thought also that maybe it wasn't going to work for him to be in England, but maybe he could if he could
like
somehow
a place in Rome.
Yeah,
or something.
If he could somehow bring Henry back and have things enforced, like he'd get rewarded in Rome.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just bummer.
It beats not having anything and like totally.
No, for sure. Just being just that.
Yeah.
All right.
And also you have to I think it's like that's what Wolsey does, kind of like me, how I'm productive and I do stuff. Like I'm sure it was just killing him.
Yeah, just not to do anything. It's like I got to get in there. I got to get
my hands into this. I got to work my magic, my Wolsey magic.
Yeah. And then I feel like it was just the last straw, that just the Pope like ordering the king about his like girlfriend or what, like.
Yeah, and that happened after Wolsey. So I'm looking at this timeline here, and that was Wolsey was arrested in the autumn of 1530, and then it was in January of 31 that. So a couple months later, the Pope.
But it just seems that seems like a bad move.
Yeah.
Like just. You're talking to the wrong. You're telling the wrong person the wrong thing.
He'd already summoned him to Rome a year before to appear before the court. Remember, like where we were at last episode, and it's like you don't quite get the message that it's not going to happen.
So that was after the court. In real life, he went to the court in October.
Well, he didn't actually go to Rome. He was called to Rome. So the Legantine court that we saw was in the summer of 1529.
Okay.
And he was summoned to Rome after that. Remember, they said we're going to put it off till October.
Yep.
And then in the autumn of all that time was when we're looking at, like, maybe let's talk to the universities, do church reform, blah, 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 blah. And then
so they never had that October hearing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I didn't know that part.
And then a year and a half later, he's ordered to go to Rome.
All right, so they never had the follow up hearing that they said come to Rome and do this.
Not that affected Henry at all.
The king started going around and checking out. Like they might have had some hearing, but it didn't matter because. Yeah. Okay. All right, and then Boleyn really seemed to slap, kind of slap to the face of the Spanish ambassador, like saying about, Peter wasn't was just riding the coattails. And, man, that's that would be dangerous stuff to stay around more.
Yes, it would for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, and then when they were taking Wolsey away, you said that that's a real quote.
And he said.
Yeah.
If I'd served God as diligently as I've served the King of England, he would not have abandoned me in my gray hair. Yep.
That's what you get for serving the king, I guess.
It's true that.
And then the Spanish ambassador just kind of up and left?
I don't think so, because when I look at the record of when he was at court, he had some absences from 1539 to 1540, and again in 1542. So he
was in there between there.
Yeah. So I don't think
So you don't think he really just up and left?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
He might have been called back for something, but for a brief period. But
and then what was that play thing or the mask?
Yeah.
Is that what you call it?
Yeah, that was a mask. So there is a record that they had something like this celebrating. I mean, it was just kind of a parody, and they would do. Remember how Henry met Anne at that one mask?
Yeah.
So these were common things to do, and you would do it like a satirical TV show now, or so like Saturday Night Live lately has been doing. Okay. So it was along those lines of something they were doing, bringing up the Cardinal's fall, and I think it's interesting though because the depiction of it there is so different than in Wolf Hall, where like in that one I was looking and Cromwell was right in joining in with everything, and in Wolf Hall he was watching and thinking like about these people who had ruined Wolsey and how he was going to destroy them and stuff. And I think that that's probably closer to the truth, knowing the little bit that we do about Cromwell's personality, that I don't think he was such a careful man too. I don't think he would have been right in the middle of this whole party being like right, because he hid his Protestantism too for a long time. So I think that part was incorrect.
Yeah, in the depiction of what he was doing. Wolsey didn't really kill himself. I mean, I guess we don't know, but
he died of natural causes. But you saw that how at the end he said no one must ever know. Henry said no one must ever know that he killed himself. So I think they're just kind of playing like that was the great cover up or something.
Yeah,
but
that maybe he really did, but they covered it up. But you don't think?
I don't think he did. That was such a sin. That was such.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't guess so. I mean,
and he was old and sick by this point.
Yeah,
it's not unusual that he would catch something.
So then they showed Henry shooting his bow.
Yep.
And they came and Moore, I guess, came and told him, or whoever.
It was Brandon.
Brandon.
Yeah.
Did you know that archers way back when wouldn't fire with the bow on the left side of the arrow on the left side of their bow? They would put it on the other side because then you could just slap it up to it and fire more rapidly. Like they could do 5 shots in 3 seconds. Not those. You're talking about longbows.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking. Okay.
And so it's just like it was a different.
Interesting.
It was a different scene.
Yeah. English archers at this time were still so important. The English archers responsible for the the success England had in the 100 Years of War at Crécy and Agincourt. And it was by law, everybody had to practice archery for like 3 hours on a Sunday. It was like the law. So that's interesting. Where'd you read that?
I on some video I saw there's some guy that's like brought back the art of shooting arrows, and like he can do some amazing, shoot like 10 arrows on 10 different targets in like
a minute.
No, like 5 seconds.
Oh my
God.
It's
crazy. You should look up super fast bow shooter guy.
I will.
It's pretty amazing. So, did Henry really start arresting Catholics then?
Yeah. So what he started doing, he called a parliament, and it was the Reformation Parliament here that went from 1529 to 36. He lodged a charge against the clergy that was a lesser form of treason, and it was committed when an attempt was made to exercise illegal jurisdiction that rivaled that of the crown. So he was saying...
So when they tried to fight for, like, royal power...
Yeah.
He was saying that that's a crime.
Exactly.
Because you're challenging the...
Yeah.
It's like treason light. That's funny.
Yeah. And so in 1531,
funny,
the clergy paid £100,000 to buy a pardon for their crime. And Henry demanded more, and he said that the clergy needed to recognize that they held no jurisdiction independently of the crown. And so then, it continued from there. And so that was...
So this is all like a build-up to...
him saying that he's the head of the church.
To the leading.
Yeah.
All right, and then this is the question I was saying about in the beginning that's sort of a spoiler alert question. So if you don't want to give things away, don't listen. But... Did everyone end up dying that was around Henry at this time? Like, did he killed Anne Boleyn?
Yeah.
Did he killed Thomas More?
Yep.
He killed Thomas Cromwell?
Yep.
Did he kill Charles Brandon?
No.
How about Norfolk?
No. Norfolk managed to survive.
He made it through all this.
He made it. He even had another niece marry Henry later on, Catherine
he's
Howard.
Really good finangler or whatever.
Yeah.
And Wolsey died or whatever, so he was, he lost his life. Who else? Boleyn's dad, did he die?
No, he made it.
I guess that's most of the
Anne and her brother both died.
And both Anne and her brother. Thomas Tallis wasn't killed, was he? Okay.
But he also wasn't at court during this time.
I know. He wasn't even around now.
No.
He wasn't having gay romances with people in court at this time.
No.
All right.
I think it's interesting that the person who kind of started was at the center of all this with Henry. Catherine, he didn't kill her.
Yeah, she made it out.
Yeah, so. I mean, she...
All right, so he didn't kill everyone. That's like about half and half.
Now you have 50-50 chance.
Not too bad.
He didn't kill the Spanish ambassador. Yeah.
I haven't killed more than 50% of my friends. I'm doing all right.
All right. And you're not even the King of England, right?
No, not yet.
All right.
Well,
wait. Were you going to ask anything
those
else?
Are all the...
There was. I thought maybe your attention would be drawn by the sex scene at the end.
Yes. I had one comment on the sex scene at the end.
Right.
Oh, the torment when the Pope will not grant you a divorce. I think that's what they were. She was writhing on the ground, thinking, "Damn it, Pope!
I hate this Pope.
You're standing in the way of me." And
and I don't. They would have had to have been. I don't know that they actually would have had full on intercourse like that even by this point. It would have been so risky.
Yeah, no, that would have been a bad.
Yeah.
If someone would have snapped a picture of that.
Yeah.
And it would have hit the tabloids.
Not good.
So
All right.
Do you want to wrap up with your themes or anything?
I just think, this is the start of things getting so weird for people for everyday people with religion. And, how this is going to start. Up until now, it's just affected the court. But it's going to start to trickle down and
all sorts of people.
Affect lots of people here pretty soon. And, the kind of this growth of questioning. This is like the first time people really are able to successfully question power. And, that's once you open that Pandora's box, it's hard to close that.
Once Pandora gets out of her box, you can't put her back in, man.
No, you cannot. And so it's just interesting to see that this is kind of the start of people. There's now this effort to contain. And in the past, if there were riots and things, people would be able to contain them. But we're going to start to see in Henry's reign now regular people fighting for their religious beliefs and fighting this stuff. And it's in part, if the king's willing to fight the Pope, and if the king's saying that the Holy Pope is somebody you can fight, well, maybe we can fight the king and stuff. And so in season 2, I think we're going to start to see things like that.
Wow.
So
it's going to bring in the common man. It's
Yep. You start messing with the common man and his opinion of God and telling him he's going to hell if...
it's a lot more drama than just all your fancy dressed friends prancing around court trying not to do anything wrong.
Exactly.
All of a sudden you're messing with
Yep. All right. So thank you for listening along with us.
Thank you very much. We'd really appreciate it if you went to iTunes and gave us a rating.
Yep. And you can check out watchingthetudors.com to see more resources and links. And that is it. We'll be back next week with season 2.
We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.